Britney chose that doctor from a list. So she didn't really have a choice, right? She had a list of people, probably all of them working for or with UCLA, that was presented to her by her lawyers. What do we know about her lawyers? They were chosen for her. She was constitutionally deprived. She was not allowed to choose her own lawyer. She was trying to hire a different lawyer. She was not allowed to choose her own lawyer, but she was allowed to choose her own doctor. So sort that out. She wasn't competent enough to choose her own lawyer, but she was competent enough to choose her own doctor. Or did they give her a list, any of which doctors would have been just fine? I think you know the answer to the question, and I know for certain that I do in my heart. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. How are you doing on this fine Tuesday? I'm doing quite well. I was just going back through some of the older notes that I had taken along the way in Britney Spears' case. And I mentioned this several times before, but when I first started doing the Free Britney investigations, I was really trying to free Britney from a conservatorship. Now, it's arguable whether or not Britney is free today, but that is not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is I wanted to start sharing with y'all some of that older research that I had done along the way in order to help fill in some of the gaps and some of the blanks about the team, about the medical professionals, and about those people who did ultimately put Britney Spears into an illegal, unconstitutional, unnecessary conservatorship. So today, I really want to take a little bit of a dive into the UCLA Resnick Psychiatric Hospital. Now, what is Resnick Psychiatric Hospital? For the purposes of this video, we will be talking about Britney Spears' case, but you should know it's also where Kanye West was put into the 5150 back in 2016.
And finally here tonight, after a turbulent weekend, Kanye West is getting some help. The breaking news tonight, Kanye West hospitalized in LA. Officials confirming to ABC News that the rapper and business mogul has checked into the hospital.
Now, I know that, fast forward to 2022, Kanye West is a little bit of a controversial subject today, but he was hospitalized in 2016 for exhaustion and like sleep deprivation. And he was right in the middle of a tour, like a worldwide tour. So anyone would be exhausted and sleep deprived, but that was where presumably this guy, Harley Pasternak or whoever, had him committed to Resnick Psychiatric Hospital for the 5150. So it's the same hospital that Britney was put into in 2008.
The 26-year-old was taken to the UCLA Medical Center by ambulance with a police escort in the early hours of Thursday morning. She's apparently been committed to a psychiatric ward for a 72-hour stay. US law allows patients to be placed on involuntary psychiatric hold for 72 hours if it's thought they could pose a danger to themselves or others.
Same hospital that Lindsay Lohan has been put into. And what do we know about her? Well, allegedly, according to reports on the internet, Lou Taylor was trying to put her into a conservatorship back in like 2011 or whatever. Amanda Bynes has also stayed at the UCLA Psychiatric Hospital. I'm not sure if she was at Resnick or not. But she has stayed there and she's another conservatee. And then, of course, we had Demi Lovato being honored by the Resnick Psychiatric Hospital for some award or something. But for the purposes of this video, I really want to travel back in time to 2008 and look a little bit closer into some of the players that were involved and their connection to the Resnick Psychiatric Hospital. First and foremost, let's start with Dr. Stephen Marmer.
I'm Stephen Marmer. I'm the chair of the board. In case you hadn't noticed, life is difficult, complex, and unpredictable. You can't change this. It's the nature of things.
Dr. Stephen Marmer was mentioned and recommended by Sam Ingham after Britney was deemed unable to hire her own lawyer back in 2008 by the dishonorable Judge Reva Gates. Reva Gates said Britney is not competent to hire her own attorney, which was not true. Reva never even looked at Britney. She never even laid eyes on Britney. Whose word did she take for it? Samuel Ingham, who allegedly had gone and talked to Britney in the hospital and just said that she was incapable of understanding or whatever. So Sam Ingham tells to Judge Reva Gates, hey, I have an idea. This is back in 2008. Why don't we let Dr. Stephen Marmer do Britney's psychological evaluation? Now, Dr. Stephen Marmer is on the medical teaching staff at UCLA Medical School, and so he is connected to UCLA. It just seems kind of like a conflict of interest here because the woman was staying in a UCLA hospital, and then you have Samuel Ingham, who also has a conflict here. What's the conflict? The conflict is Sam Ingham has a financial incentive
Money, money, money.
to say Britney doesn't have the competence to hire her own lawyer. Because if Britney didn't have the competence to hire her own lawyer, guess who gets to be her lawyer and make millions of dollars? That's right, Sam Ingham. Do you see that financial conflict there? It's just obvious to me. So Sam Ingham stands up in February 2008, in front of Reva Gates and says, hey, Judge Gates, why don't you let Dr. Stephen Marmer, a UCLA medical school teacher and presumably on staff at UCLA Resnick Psychiatric Hospital, do the evaluation? Well, if you've kept up with this story, then you know that Stephen Marmer did not end up doing it. So then the ball gets kicked down to this other guy named Dr. James Sparr. Now, James Sparr is affiliated also with UCLA. He works with the UCLA Medical Center, and he is the one who ultimately did do some version of an evaluation on Britney. Now, importantly, the evaluation that he did was not one of those 730 evaluations that is required to put someone into a conservatorship. No. In fact, the paperwork for the conservatorship that Andrew Wallet and Jamie Spears filed said that they would file the 730 evaluation paperwork with the court before the next hearing. This was back in February 2008. That never got filed. It never was filed. So Dr. James Sparr did do some type of meeting with Britney. He did some type of evaluation that I guess was good enough for Reva Gates, even though it shouldn't have been by law, by statute. But who freaking cares in the kangaroo courts? In Stanley Moss Courthouse, they do whatever they want to do and they get away with it. So that's what happened here. Interestingly, Dr. James Sparr was also associated with the Donald Sterling competency hearings, who's a very, very wealthy man, also RACIST, a very wealthy man who owns like sports teams and stuff.
Monday, 3:15 p.m. from an outside caller at 3-1.
Donald Sterling. My number is, and I'm going to have you lose your license. How dare you give my medical records from my head to a law firm who hired you? They hired you for the purpose of finding me incompetent. I'm not incompetent. You're incompetent, you stupid doctor. How dare you? I want to see your records. How much will you pay for that? This is a conspiracy. You and the lawyer got together to try to establish that I was unable to perform. I'm more able to perform than you are. You didn't even do any type of exam with me, and I don't understand. In your letter, you are writing it to him. There's an ethical issue here. Why would you give my personal mental records to a lawyer for the purpose of suing me? I'm just so excited. I'm so angry. I just can't believe it. Anyhow, have your lawyer and your insurance company call me. I'm going to call UCLA now, and I'm going to get you fired from UCLA because you're nothing but a tramp. How dare you let someone use you that way? You know, you rely on doctors. You think that they'll be above it all, but obviously you're not. You'll sell yourself for nothing. How dare you? How dare you give my records to a lawyer for the purpose of using against me? Well, this is a conspiracy, and I'll show you what I think of you when I see you in court. Have your insurance company call me. My name is Donald Sterling, in case you forgot. And if you look at your bill, you see that your material was addressed to a lawyer. So obviously he sent me to you, and you agreed to the conspiracy to do this. Thank you very much, Doctor.
And James Sparr was also associated with Sumner Redstone's competency trials.
Boardroom drama is intensifying at Viacom as questions swirl about the health of Executive Chairman Sumner Redstone. The 92-year-old Mr. Redstone has overwhelming control of Viacom, with a roughly 80% voting stake. and did not attend the annual meetings of Viacom or CBS, which he also controls. Viacom, which owns cable networks like Nickelodeon, MTV, and Comedy Central, is dealing with declining viewership in the last few years. Documents relating to Mr. Redstone's divorce in 2002 grant that Ms. Redstone will become chairman of Viacom when Mr. Redstone dies or is incapacitated. Mr. Domon has a clause in his contract that would allow him to walk away from his post if he isn't made chairman upon Mr. Redstone's death or incapacitation. CBS CEO Leslie Moonvest's contract has a similar provision. However, the corporate drama unfolds. Mr. Redstone said that he set up a trust decades ago to ensure that his controlling interest in Viacom and CBS, once he is gone, would be, quote, professionally managed for the benefit of all shareholders, end quote.
Importantly, Dr. James Sparr is a geriatric doctor. He specializes in geriatric neurocognitive disorders, which means old people. So Britney Spears being 26 years old at the time, very confusing to me why a geriatric doctor was being asked to do any type of evaluations, but it's possible that it's because he was affiliated and associated with UCLA and there's a whole racket going on over there. I just said possible before y'all get defamation suit happy.
This is a conspiracy. You and the lawyer got together to try to establish that I was unable to perform.
I'm allowed to speculate and I'm allowed to say stuff is possible. Is this facts? No. But I am telling you that when you click on the link, look here, Smell Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. But look, the website is a uclahealth.org website. So Dr. James Sparr is affiliated and associated with UCLA. Now, interestingly, that is where Britney was being held on the 5150 when she was taken against her will and incarcerated on the night of January 31st, 2008. Now, all this stuff's going on while Britney is being held against her will, psychiatrically incarcerated. She wanted to hire another lawyer, not Sam Ingham, but alas, dishonorable Judge Reva Gates did not think that Britney was competent to do so, which now I'm just starting to wonder, is this whole thing just a big racket? Are they all just in on it together? Are they all just trafficking celebrities through this same exact pipeline? It's just a question. I'm not saying it's a fact. It's just a question. So Dr. Stephen Reed and James Sparr are collaborators on a chapter of a forthcoming psychiatry textbook, and they are colleagues at UCLA Medical School and go-to court experts on the evaluation on mental fitness in the elderly. And Sam Ingham also wrote some of this book, if I recall correctly. Interestingly, a district court, according to the Daily News, Alzheimer's expert won't testify in ex-sheriff Lee Baca's corruption trial. This is the ex-sheriff Lee Baca, and he was the sheriff, I believe, when Britney was put into the psychiatric hold. A federal judge ruled Friday he won't allow a mental health expert to testify that former Los Angeles County Sheriff Lee Baca was in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease while being investigated in a jail corruption scandal. The U.S. District Court Judge Percy Anderson said in a written ruling that Dr. James Sparr's testimony would be entirely speculative and inadmissible. It is the product of unreliable methodology and artificially limited facts and bare speculation. Okay, so look, in 2017, which is 9 years after this guy is the sole doctor that Judge Reva Gates took into consideration on whether Britney had dementia or not. Again, not reaching or meeting the statutory minimums that are required here. We have another judge, a district court judge outside of the Stanley Moss Courthouse, ruling that Dr. James Sparr, we can't even accept his testimony because it's speculative, it's inadmissible, and it's the product of unreliable methodology. It artificially limits facts, and it's just this guy's bare speculation. So why is it that he ended up being the one that got to make any type of evaluation on Britney? I don't know. It just raises questions for me, like, is the methodology that he used on Lee Baca that was ruled by a federal court to not be good enough to pass muster? Is it the same methodology he used to say Britney had dementia or whatever he was trying to damn say back then? Just interesting, just raises questions. Now, we also know that there was a doctor who worked with Britney named Dr. Deborah Nadell at UCLA. Let's move on to her. So she is described as a caring, compassionate psychiatrist, but she also had a hand in locking Britney up against her will. Now, Deborah was the one, according to news reports, who signed the papers that said Britney wasn't good enough to leave after the 5150. She had to stay for a 5250, which meant that Britney had to stay not just for those 3 days. No. She had to stay for 14 days. Now, she is described as an excellent clinician and an excellent psychiatrist, says Harold Young, the clinical director at the Maple Counseling Center in Beverly Hills, where Spears' psychiatrist, Dr. Deborah Nadell, worked for about 5 years. Now, just as a totally interesting side note, which could be absolutely a coincidence because very common word, Maple, but Lou Taylor is agent for a company called Maple Living LLC. And Deborah Nadell, Britney's psychiatrist from 2008 in the hospital at UCLA, worked at a place called Maple Counseling Center. Not only did she work there, but another guy who worked there with her, Harold Young, came out and basically vouched for Deborah and said, oh, she's excellent and she's a good clinician and a good psychiatrist. So Nadell had also started treating Britney in 2008, and she instigated Britney's second hospitalization in January, according to this news report. Let me click. So let me show y'all the article. This is People magazine from January 31st, 2008. This is the day that Britney was hospitalized. It says Britney goes willingly for a psychiatric hold, but if you're put in on a 5150, by default, necessarily, it's called involuntary. So maybe they wanted to put that in the headlines for People magazine. She went willingly, but she was involuntarily, by statute, involuntarily incarcerated, hospitalized at UCLA Medical Center for psychiatric hold early Thursday morning after being transported by ambulance around 1 a.m. An LAPD source tells People Britney was escorted by police. Oh yeah, willingly. Okay. And is on her way to get help. She was transported for treatment and evaluation during a 72-hour emergency hold known as a 5150. She went willingly, and it was like something in her heart was telling her she should go. She knew something was wrong. Yeah, she might have gone willingly, Sam, but involuntary is the name of the game with a 5150. Police or a mental health professional can request one if a person is deemed to be a danger to herself or others. So then it goes on to remind us that Britney was held at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, which is where they put Steve-O for his 5150, on such an order earlier in January 2008. What brought on the hospitalization? She was driving around her neighborhood like a mad woman. She had been prescribed medication, which she refuses to take. This is just another sad evening. Spears chose Nadell from a list of doctors recommended by her lawyers. So Britney chose Dr. Nadell from a list of doctors recommended by her lawyers, a source says. Now, what lawyers? Was she allowed to choose them? No. She was determined by a judge who never laid eyes on her to be incompetent to hire her own lawyer. So Britney gets lawyers assigned to her that she didn't choose. And then from those lawyers, they assign her a list of doctors that she gets to choose from. Nadell is now on the staff at UCLA and is well thought of in the therapeutic community. I think Britney is in somebody's hands who will be caring, concerned, compassionate, and respectful, says Nadell's former coworker. Britney chose that doctor from a list. So she didn't really have a choice, right? She had a list of people, probably all of them working for or with UCLA, that was presented to her by her lawyers. What do we know about her lawyers? They were chosen for her. She was constitutionally deprived. She was not allowed to choose her own lawyer. She was trying to hire a different lawyer. She was not allowed to choose her own lawyer, but she was allowed to choose her own doctor. So sort that out. She wasn't competent enough to choose her own lawyer, but she was competent enough to choose her own doctor. Or did they give her a list, any of which doctors would have been just fine? I think you know the answer to the question, and I know for certain that I do in my heart. But it doesn't end there. Now we've gone through a couple of the players who are associated with the UCLA Resnick Center. Let's now get into the Resnick Center itself. Now, it was fined by the federal government for violating patients' HIPAA rights, and it was giving away celebrities' medical information. UCLA Hospital receives $865,000 HIPAA fine for failing to protect celebrity medical records. The Department of Health and Human Services charged them almost $1 million for HIPAA violations caused by allowing the medical records of 2 celebrity patients to be accessed by non-authorized personnel. So who were these non-authorized personnel? Who was it? The 2 patients made complaints about hospital employees having improper access to their medical records, alleged the hospital broke the law. During this period of time, there was a number of instances of employees snooping and a number of members of staff who were fired for looking at medical records of celebrities, including Farrah Fawcett, Britney Spears, and Maria Shriver. The latter had her data accessed during her time as California's first lady. The high-profile privacy violations were reported heavily in the media, with the Times the first to report on the disclosures in a 2008 report, same year of the conservatorship. They led to new state legislation, which is almost never a good thing in my experience. So what else do I have here? Let me see. Okay, so then I have one more section here about Britney's stay itself, wherein somebody had reported to the media that Britney was in a padded room. So another People magazine article published a couple days after Britney had been in there. It says Britney now under a 14-day hold, plus a look inside her life in the UCLA Medical Center psych ward. Britney's hospitalization has been extended to an additional 14-day hold, a source exclusively confirms to People. So that's what I told y'all earlier. It went from the 5150 to the 5250. Only her psychiatrist would have had the authority to request the involuntary stay. So is that Nadell? However, it's possible she could be out earlier if she legally demands to be released or her doctor deems her well enough. Well, do y'all think that Sam Ingham was giving Britney proper legal advice that she could demand to be released? No, that man was saying she couldn't even choose her own lawyer. What is life like for Spears at the Resnick Psychiatric Hospital? According to the patient's Bill of Rights, she's allowed to wear her own clothes and keep her own personal possessions, including toiletries. She may also see visitors every day and make and receive phone calls, but not on her personal cell phone. So as usual, taking away someone's cell phone. Since UCLA is a teaching hospital, the attending doctors are often accompanied by students. Staffers check on patients at least once an hour. So then it says it's a terrible situation. The Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital is known as one of the top facilities of its kind. Still, it's a terrible situation, says a source close to the Spears family. Britney is in a padded room. Her family is worried about her. Terry Wasserman, a veteran LA attorney specializing in mental health cases who's not involved in Britney's case, explains that if a patient becomes combative, he or she could be placed in a quiet room. Well, hold on. People magazine just told us in an article from 2 or 3 days ago that Britney went willingly. So that doesn't align with she went willingly, if you ask me. It sounds to me like Britney was trying to leave. Look at this. Just look at the context clues. If a patient becomes combative, they could be placed in a quiet room, some of which are padded. Look at the context clues, y'all. She could be let out earlier if she legally demands to be released. Maybe she was legally demanding to be released. And then instead of doing that, instead of honoring her statutory constitutional right, they put her in a padded room. What if? I'm just asking what if. The lawyer adds, another possibility is being confined to a bed by leather restraints when a patient is a threat to oneself or medical staff. Well, if a patient is a threat to oneself or others is the only way that you can get a 5150. So it seems like by statute, they could just have her in these leather restraints for 15 days. A psychiatrist can also inject a person with medication. And that is what Kanye West said that they did do to him. They drugged him. The lawyer goes on to say a doctor can force a patient to take prescribed medication. Oh, Miss Caring, Compassionate Nadell, was she maybe the one doing that? If he or she resists, i.e. practicing their own medical autonomy, the psychiatrist can get authorization to forcefully medicate them, but only after a hearing on the matter takes place. They put it out here in the public for y'all to just look at it. They put it out here. And instead of people asking questions back then and saying, wow, I think this might be a little extreme, even if she was having a mental breakdown and she shaved her head, it's inhumane. Strapping people down, forcing them into isolation, putting them in padded rooms, injecting them with medications against their consent, telling them that they have to be put into solitary confinement without a jury of their peers to effectuate that because they were combative, because they didn't want to take medications, they didn't want to take someone else's drug of choice. This is sick and vile. Every person who participates in this will be remembered in history on the wrong side of history. This cannot be how we treat people. This cannot be how we do things. And yet, here the fuck it is, black and white on the biggest celebrities in the world. I don't care what your feelings are on Britney Spears, Kanye West, Bam Margera, Lindsay Lohan. It doesn't matter what your feelings are, because if they can do it to Kanye West, regardless if you like him or not, they can do it to you whenever your opinion is the one people don't like. I don't agree with his opinions. Don't get it twisted. And if you get it twisted, I'm blocking you from the channel, because y'all have got to learn how to use your common sense and nuance. If you can't do it, then this isn't the place for you. Go be stupid somewhere else on the internet, because this is not the place. This cannot be how we continue to do things. We cannot forcefully drug people. We cannot forcefully tie them down, lock them in rooms against their consent. When they become combative, anybody would be combative. Anybody would be combative. She didn't do anything to deserve this. She didn't ever do anything to deserve it. And yet, this is how she was treated. Like a prisoner of damn war. I don't even think you should treat prisoners of war that way. But this is out of control. This cannot be how we do this anymore. This cannot be how it happens anymore. It should have never been how it happened in the first place. That's all I have for today. But I promise you there's some other very shady characters and some very shady practices that I'm very, very much looking forward to exposing in the very near future. Facts ain't defamation. Love you, mean it. KBYE.